Hello, hi, and how are you? This is Coach Aaron Saft and the Running is Life podcast. And coming back again, going to try to make a weekly habit out of this. As I said, new recording time and release will be Friday mornings. I hope to get these out to you so that they're here for you for your weekend long runs. Maybe something to listen to and ponder upon as you run. And listen to me in 2 times speed. I already talk fast, so stay with me. Like I said last week, lots to catch up on and talk about. I had some great emails, and I want to first and foremost say thank you for reaching out, be it through email or through social media. I really do appreciate everybody chiming in and speaking to the episode. Obviously, it was an emotional one for me. I have those every once in a while as we describe something or talk about something. I'm sure I'll have more in the future. And to that said, I want to just say thank you for all of your compliments, for your comments, for your questions, because that provoked a lot of today's episode and some of the things I'm going to talk about here in this episode. Some good reminders, things that we can talk about, through the summer here. I think there's a lot that transpires in the summer, and we forget about some things and do some things that we probably shouldn't. And I fell into that trap myself in the last 2 weeks, and I'm going to talk about that as well. So, as I spoke about Tor de Geants last week, and those that are not familiar with Tor de Geants, it is a race in the Italian Alps. It is a circuit that stays within Italy. It has, they claim, about 77,000 feet of vertical gain. Those that have run it typically get more gain than that. Typically, they're found about 80,000 to 85,000 in vertical gain, and mileage anywhere from 209 to 215 miles. So very, very long race. We have about 6.25 days to accomplish it. It's in September. There can be snow. There can be heat. It can be anything. So we have to be prepared. We're told to carry a puffy jacket with us, multiple battery sources, multiple light sources, rain gear that includes not only a rain jacket but waterproof pants, waterproof gloves. We get a drop bag that travels along with us. So instead of creating multiple drop bags, we get a big duffel bag and we put all of our stuff in there, and the race transports that bag to the next aid station after you've passed through what they call the life base. And in there we have to have some gear that we don't necessarily have to carry with us until we're told to do so. And that may include things like crampons, so that if it does snow or get icy, we have traction devices. So there's a lot to this race, and we're going to be talking more and more about Tor de Geants. I've had some really good conversations with people that have done it, and I've messaged a number of friends that have done it. I've coached Rachel Blinn, who did it, and she's doing it again this year. I've had some fantastic resources, so I'm very pleased with my knowledge going into this event. Not that I can really anticipate what this is going to throw at me. Being my second 200-miler, the first was in 2021 when I ran Bigfoot 200, which ended up being about 209 miles, somewhere between 46 to 49,000 feet of vertical gain. So this one is going to be significantly more, obviously, and I'm looking forward to that challenge. But getting to the point, when I talked about Western States and talked about Tor de Geants, I spoke to the fact that Tor de Geants speaks to me a little bit more so because it captures my imagination, it captures my heart, it captures the essence of what I love about running, and that's simply being out and being in the mountains and being able to enjoy it. Now, Western States does indeed offer that, but at the same time, it has become quite a race, and you have a race against time, which adds pressure to it. In Tor de Geants, of course, there is time limits and there are cutoffs, but they're quite a bit more generous And, if the time does eventually cut me off, then that's so be it. But I don't want to put my pressure upon myself that, I want to go out there and simply enjoy the experience in the Alps. And, so again, this speaks to me a little bit more. But when I get down to the nitty gritty and I think about how am I going to train for this, I think back to what Jason Koop said about like training for Hard Rock and for Tor de Geants itself, that he would be hiking a vast majority of this race. Well over 80 to 85% of the race was going to be in the form of hiking. And that's the same here in Tor de Geants. So I need to become more efficient at hiking and, of course, climbing. So that's what I focused on. But the trap that I fell into was that I didn't account for doing cross-country practice in with my own training. And that was a stupid mistake, obviously. But I was running extra mileage. And, one of my first weeks back after taking a few weeks of rebuilding, I already had 82 miles on the week. Now, again, a lot of that was hiking, but it was still time on feet, mixed in with some running. And then I had over 23,000 feet of vertical gain in that week. Then the second week, I realized the folly, I realized my mistake, and reduced my volume in consideration with what I'd be doing with the kids at cross-country practice. But I had more vertical gain in that second week. I got over 30,000 feet in last week in training. Now again, I did about 2 sessions in which I did a morning session on the treadmill and gained over 4,000 feet. And then I did the same thing in the afternoon. So I gained over 8,000 feet in the course of a day, and I did that twice. So there's 16,000 feet right there. So half of it was just in 2 days, again, in a walking modality on the treadmill. But with that said, Sunday came along and I got dehydrated because I filtered as much as I could, and I carried as much as I could, but it was just so hot and I was using some of it to cool off, and I ran out of fluids. And I think I got too dehydrated. I tried to rehydrate afterwards, but I was on my feet for over 7 hours. It was a 20-mile route with right under 7,000 feet of vertical gain. And, that's obviously a lot of time on feet. I woke up Monday morning and my right knee was sore. And so, being where I'm at in my life, I recognize that, training on that knee was not going to be the smart thing to do. I had a day off on Monday anyway. That was in the plan. So I took the day entirely off. I didn't even run with the kids. I walked while they ran and just tried to, take care of my knee. And kind of figure out what was the best course of action. So, on Tuesday, I brought my bike out. The biking felt fine on my knee. Actually, that wasn't Tuesday, that was Wednesday. Tuesday, I took entirely off. Wednesday, I took entirely off with some biking. So I biked for the first time yesterday. Knee did well, and then I biked with the kids this morning, and it loosened my knee up, which was a great sign. It felt much better after biking, and I've been using a topical CBD salve. It's hemp based. It's a company out of Hendersonville here in North Carolina, and it actually has been doing. It's been doing great for my knee. Be it a placebo or whatever it may be, my knee is feeling better and better. And with the time off as well, today being Thursday when I'm recording this, I'm just going to hop on the treadmill and do a little uphill hiking and just see how my knee responds to the uphill. It's going to be slow, easy. I can always cut it off because I'm on the treadmill, but that's how I'm going to test my knee today. I don't want to really try to run just yet and kind of create that, that force on the knee. So I'm going to go for a little treadmill hike, test it out, see how it does, and go from there. I did have planned to do the out and back on the Art Lobe this weekend. I really wanted to get that in. with, my knee in the condition it's in. Obviously, I don't think that's the best idea. I'm going to talk it over with my wife, kind of have her assess my knee and see what she thinks. If my knee is in the condition to do part of it, maybe I'll do part of it. But we'll, if I'm not in the condition to do any of it, the goal is to get to Tor de Geants healthy. So whatever that takes, that's so be it. If I have to cross train and just hike uphill for a little while longer to rehab this knee and make sure it's 100%, so be it. But it's my own fault. I did too much too quickly, in hopes of training for Tor de Geants and getting ready for Tor de Geants. So, that's the error in my way there. So, you can take it from me. We have to be smart about our buildup, and that gets into a lot of the things that we're going to talk about and review today. Because I had a lot of good questions come in, and I think Chaz Adams asked me to remind people about some summer training principles and things that we should base our training on and do within our training. So we're going to talk about that as well. So with that, that kind of topic in mind, let's talk about some of the things that summer brings to us. So obviously heat, the hotter temperatures, as well as humidity will elevate our heart rate. Our body is trying to cool ourselves off, so it is expending extra energy in that cooling system. And because it's spending extra energy, it elevates our heart rate because now we're trying to exercise as well as cool ourselves off. So it takes a lot of ourselves to do so. So our heart rate increases. So with that said, is you have to remember that your paces are not going to be the same here in the summer. The body, once again, it doesn't understand the pace at which you're running. That is not a metric that really translates to the body, okay? The body understands its heart rate, the stress you're placing upon it, and the duration of time for which you're doing it. The body doesn't measure in miles, it measures in time. So with that said, you have to be responsible to your body and slow down. Obviously, if the heart rate's getting high at a certain temperature, don't worry about what the pace is saying. Worry about what your heart rate is saying. That's the hard thing to remember, is that the effort has to remain the same, even if the pace is slower. So remember that your heart rate is the key, okay? Don't get caught up in the pace, okay? We have to just throw that out the window. Let your ego go, okay? Pace doesn't matter in the summer. Just make sure the effort is the same as it would be in the fall. How does it feel? That's the biggest thing, okay? So that metric is a good one to go by, even if the times are slower. It's hot. You have to kind of manage your effort better in that regard. So be careful. With that, we have to monitor our fatigue levels, okay? The heat does take a toll upon us. Again, our bodies are trying to cool it off, so we're spending, again, extra energy in trying to cool ourselves off. So we can create extra fatigue, especially if our heart rate is elevated. We are going to be a bit more tired. So monitor your fatigue levels, okay? We want to make sure that resting heart rate each day isn't getting higher and higher. We want to make sure that we're maintaining average heart rate, okay? I want to make sure that our 2-week average for HRV is staying pretty much within normal. Now remember, okay, if we talk about HRV, your HRV average is going to be different during the summer than it was in the spring and winter. Okay, we are producing a different stress. We're getting a different stress from the heat. Okay, that is completely different than what we faced in the winter. The HRV is measuring the rate of change within our heart rate over the course of time. And if our heart rate is more elevated due to the heat, that is a substantial difference in the HRV. So when we look at our averages, we have to take into account that our summer average is going to be completely different. So we want to look over the course of 2 weeks, take the average, and make sure we're staying within that range. Okay, so be careful with HRV and make sure you're using it properly. Again, it's not an indicative of what you should be doing on that day. It is a score that reflects what stress came about yesterday. Okay, it's not kind to predict how you should feel or do today. So don't get hung up on that number as to whether you should run today. Again, we're looking at the average, okay, over the course of time. If that, average is not, if you're not staying within that average, okay, if you're high or low, then that's something to do. And perhaps we'll review that in another episode to talk about it. But I did talk about HRV previously, so you can find that in a previous podcast. Okay, so do remember that, but monitor your fatigue levels. And the point of all that was like monitor your metrics. What are your metrics telling you? Okay. Hydration and its effect. Of course, we want to make sure we're staying hydrated on our runs. I harp upon that to all my athletes. When they pull up their runs in Training Peaks, it's got a fluid goal for each run. You should do a sweat test and determine how much you're losing per hour and how much you should be drinking per hour, especially at these higher temperatures, knowing what you should be replacing and rehydrating with afterwards, because perhaps you're losing more than what you can drink within an hour. So you have to account for that afterwards, plus your normal hydration. Okay, if we're not hydrating, if the body is dehydrated, the blood actually thickens because it doesn't have water to make it as viscous. Okay, so the heart actually has to pump harder. So when you're dehydrated, your heart rate is going to be elevated. Again, another elevation in heart rate due to the fact that we haven't hydrated properly. So making sure you're hydrated prior to your runs and during your runs is super important. And the reason it's important during your run is that the body does dehydrate as we run, obviously. So after about 50 minutes without fluids, even in normal temperatures, the heart rate is going to begin to drift. It is going to begin to increase. So without those fluids, it's going to increase substantially more. Okay, so we have to make sure we stay hydrated. So that's a huge piece of this. Some of the things that I've talked about with my athletes is, we talk about cooling strategies for races. Here we had just went through Western States, and all of the runners you saw had various strategies for cooling off. We use those in races quite frequently, but in training we don't oftentimes do the same. Use those strategies in your running. Okay, you do a loop from your house or from your car in which you can come back and refill with ice to help cool you off. Put ice in your fluids. If you're wearing a pack, put ice in your bladder. Be creative with how you're cooling and how often you're cooling. Use these strategies in training so that you don't suffer out there. It is hot, but you can combat it with these cooling strategies. So use them. Take the time to use, whether it be an ice bandana, ice in the arm sleeves, ice in the sports bra, ice in a hat, wherever it works. Do what's best for you, okay? But use those cooling strategies within your training as well. What I see in summer as a coach is this time of year becomes the most mentally challenging time in training for any athlete due to the fact that it's so hot. It becomes less and less enjoyable to train day after day in these high temperatures and here in the Southeast, high humidity. It is increasingly difficult to drag yourself out there, especially if you're running in the evenings when it's super hot and humid. I understand that, and that's really difficult. You may have to change your run time. And that's difficult as well if you're used to running in the PM and try to switch over to AM. But, if there are cooler temperatures in the AM, it would severely benefit you to do so. It would make running and getting out to run perhaps a little less difficult. I know some people aren't morning people, so it may make it more difficult. But at the same time, if you're going to benefit from those cooler temperatures and enjoy your run exponentially more, then I think the choice is obvious to switch over to morning runs. But, I recognize, and it's oftentimes, sometimes people don't recognize why they're having such a hard time with training and their mojo is so low. And it's due to the temperatures. It's just not a pleasant time to run this time of year. It's really tough to get through it. But again, that's where your why comes in, and you have to remember what you're training for and what the goal is. Okay, and if that why is not getting you out there, then you need to revisit that why, reestablish why it is you're going to do this race. What is going to motivate you to get out the door, or should you be training for it? That's a simple question too. Do you really want to train through the summer? If the answer is no, then obviously you should switch it up. A few of my runners have switched to lower distances. They're racing like 5Ks through the summer to work on speed, and that means we've reduced volume, so the average run is much shorter. That's a great time to do that during the summer. Reduce volume and work on your speed. Now, some of us are training for fall races, obviously, that are much longer. So, my mistake the other day in doing that long run that took so much longer because I ran through the heat of the day, I should have started earlier, but then that's on me. I made the mistake myself, okay? So we have to be intentional about what time we get out. I didn't go to bed early enough Saturday night to wake up early and go, and that's on me. Like, I should have done better because I knew that was going to be a big run, and I goofed on that regard. So, but knowing these things ahead of time and having the discipline to put yourself in the place to be successful in getting out and getting it done early and forming that habit. Now, keep in mind, for any habit, it takes us about 2 weeks to establish that habit and to become consistent with it. So it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some readjustment. But after 2 weeks, it should feel pretty routine. So, but that mentally challenging piece, it's real. It is real this time of year. It's so hard. I totally understand. So it's good to have people to communicate when that challenge arises, be it a training partner that can help you get out the door, be it a coach, be it your significant other. It's good to talk it through and acknowledge that, this is really challenging and a problem that you're facing. So maybe they have some other ideas about it. Okay, so some summer reminders. All right, so slow down. Take it easy. Remember, the effort is the important thing here, the heart rate, okay? That's the biggest thing. Monitor your fatigue levels, stay hydrated, use your cooling strategies, and, recognize if you're being too mentally taxed by this season. And again, a good option may be to reduce volume and work on some speed, okay? All right, moving on to my next topic. There's so many different ways we can go here. I have quite a few things to talk about. And actually, one of the comments that I received was that I think Dan wrote in that he wishes the podcasts were longer. I totally understand that. I get it. I don't want to throw fluff into these podcasts just to make them longer. I want to make sure that I'm getting the word that I want to get out. In giving you, a podcast that has legitimately good information, and I certainly could extend podcasts longer. I would certainly need more time to prep, and again, time can be substantially an issue. I wrote down the details for this podcast last night after I checked in on my athletes, kind of going through the details, and added a few ideas here and there throughout the evening last night and this morning of things that I wanted to kind of touch upon. So I appreciate the encouragement to make these longer. I certainly do my best to make them as long as I can. But again, if I'm done with a topic, there's I want to make sure that I end it when the topic is run through. But certainly in the future, I can work to make these a little bit longer. I do appreciate that feedback. So next thing, what I've learned from high carb. I've had a conversation with my dietitian since Western States. Again, at Western States, I was trying to consume about 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour. That is what I practiced all throughout my training and had no issue with. Now, again, altitude could have been a significant factor in why my stomach turned, but at the same time, my dietitian also feels that my body perhaps does not need 90 grams of carbohydrate. We've learned over the course of the past few years that when I try to do too many carbohydrates per hour and try to eat on too short of an interval, that's when my stomach usually has issues. So we're reducing the amount of carbohydrate per hour, and I'm simply doing one gel and some liquid IV with some carbohydrate in it. In other words, some cane sugar. Per hour. So it's given me roughly about 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. That's what we're working with right now. So with Tor de Geants, we're going to go, and our next conversation will be in August, and we're going to kind of make sure that I have some good options. I pulled out my old book that has portables. I believe it's from some of the people over at Scratch Nutrition. I can certainly put that reference book on on the show notes. It is a great resource for real food options. I'm sorry, I'm just searching for a pen to make that note. But it certainly is a great book that has a lot of recipes of real food options that are really good. And I've used some of them in the past, and I've really enjoyed those. So, again, I'll put that in the show notes. So I'm going to try some of those in training as well. They make some really good rice balls, some really good muffins and cookies, and all sorts of different treats that you can have while you're running. So here we go. Got it. Okay. And the other one that we wanted to, if I can find it, I will put the HRV episode. I'll put that in the show notes as well. Okay. Trying to do a better job with the show notes of things I mentioned so that you all can go in there and see these resources. So, and if I forget something, if you hear an episode, please reach out. I sometimes I do forget things that I mentioned, and I don't put them in the show notes. So if there is something you're interested in, just reach out. Happy to find that resource for you. Okay. So, back to the high carb. I'm going to diminish the amount of carbohydrates. I listen to the sports nutrition, and I'll try to put that one in there as well. Their podcast about what Killian had done during Western States, and it was quite interesting. I wish they would break it down a little bit because it was interesting how much fat Killian was doing. But anyway, he did not do as many carbohydrates per hour as many of the other athletes, and he changed substantially how he did. He started off with less and then got to more towards the end, whereas the winner of Western States, he did more at the beginning and then went to less towards the end, probably just due to his stomach. But yeah, that was interesting to listen to and hear how Killian does it. I think the lesson, the takeaway really is we're all an N of one, right? We're all an experiment, and we have to find out what works for us. Obviously 90 grams of carbohydrate, while, it probably could have worked had I had different circumstances at Western States, perhaps, not as problems with elevation or, electrolyte balance, whatever it may have been. Maybe that would have worked, but, because it was working in training, but obviously it didn't work on race day. So we don't want that problem at Tor de Geants. So, we're going to, do a little bit less per hour. Obviously over the course of time, that may change, and I may need more over the course of time as, the time on feet gets longer and longer. But that's something we're going to discuss and look into and make sure that I have plenty of options to go to where I'm not just relying off of sports nutrition for the duration of the race. And that's something that we did. I had so many options at Bigfoot, and when I think back, I was actually using the spring awesome sauce, which we all know, what happened there. This was prior to everything coming out, that the awesome sauce did not have as much carbohydrate within it and calories within it as suggested. And now when you look at the packet and you look at things like the NAC nutrition, the actual carbohydrate percentage is quite small. And when we look at, they're saying we have 180 calories. We're only consuming about like 25 to perhaps 30 grams of carbohydrate. Okay. So not getting a lot out of those, those packets. So be careful. Look at your wrapper. See what these calories are coming from. A lot of it may be coming from fat, which, obviously, as I talked about with Killian did have some substantial amount of fats within it. But, is that what your stomach's going to tolerate? Is that what your body really needs? So be careful. Look at your wrappers and see what are you consuming and how much. Okay. So, yeah, still working on that, but that's, something to kind of consider with this high carb phase is, what is too much and how much is too much. The next piece, this was really interesting. And, again, it was another podcast. It was the UESCA podcast. That's, they do the coaching certifications. And this podcast, brought on this researcher who, claimed that Z2 training does not have the mitochondrial benefits that people have been claiming, which is extremely interesting. This podcast, it was very brief. I don't feel that. I think it was Rick. Is it Rick Price or Rick Prince? I'm sorry, I forget the host, but he didn't ask a lot of questions, which I was a little bit disappointed with, especially on a topic that was like just so left field. Over the course of time, we've heard time and again that Z2 training is substantially or prophetically one of the best means for us to train and to make improvements. And this podcast was contrary to that, or I will say this researcher was bringing up contrary information to what has been the norm. Now, I discussed that with the athletes I coached, and the big thing here, the big takeaway, was I received in the mail, right as this podcast released, a newsletter, a periodical, if you will, from the feed.com. They send out, kind of like products that they sell and stuff. It's a different way of trying to get you to buy things, obviously. But interestingly enough, they had an article in there about how much time you should spend within each zone. And at zone 2, which we're terming 60 to 70% of maximum heart rate, that zone, the feed article had recommended 80% of your volume. So 80% of your total weekly volume should be done in zone 2. Whereas this researcher that was interviewed in this podcast was saying that zone 2 is, it's not all it's cracked up to be, which is really interesting. And he stated that you should spend more time in zone 4 and 5 in the week. Which is kind of, it's a paradox from from what we're used to hearing. And I then listened to, and I talked to my my athletes about this. I listened to the Trail Runner Nation podcast with Ian Sharman. And I'll put this one in there so you can listen to. And the whole podcast was about BS. And forgive me, it was about BS and what we should call BS on. Okay, and not that we should call this BS. That's not my point. It's that we should be more analytical and not just take what they say at face value and run with it and totally change our training that flies in the face of all we've learned in physiology to this point. Now, is it something to consider? Perhaps, yes, but this is, again, quite different than anything anybody has ever done. Now, there's people that run hard all the time, and we typically see those people fall into within an injury cycle. They get a repetitive injury, or they get into a training block, get so far into it, and something resurfaces. It takes time, but the body does break down because of the fatigue. We can't forget that factor. So that's why a multiple zone training, periodized training system, it tends to work better because we include all of the systems, be it, whether we include 4 and 5 within the same training block, or if we're just focused on zone 4 in one block and zone 5 in another, depending on what we're training for. But, mixing up the systems rather than constantly barraging the body with a certain stimulus, especially multiple times a week, that can be very difficult, very fatiguing, very taxing. And what he was claiming is that we just do shorter workouts more often, and that would, have more benefit. Now, again, what are we training for? If we're looking at what are we training for, and we're talking about doing these type of workouts, would that necessarily benefit an ultra runner? Perhaps not. Again, we have to be careful with how much we're doing, especially with the amount of volume that we want to include to prepare the body for the distance. So again, it goes back to what I was talking about with nutrition. All of us are an N of 1. What works for some may not work for others. Okay, we can't say this is the end all be all. There's no training system that that says this person should or all people should do this specific type of workouts all the time. I don't include Z5, Zone 5, in some of my athletes because they have a higher risk of injury, and Zone 5 training can yield a higher likelihood of injury. So we have to be very careful with who is doing what and how often. We have to look at each athlete separately, as you should yourself. Analyze, does this make sense for me? I don't do Zone 5 training anymore because I typically get hurt during that training phase because of the fatigue and strain it puts upon my muscles. I'm also about to turn 48 years old. I would love to still be able to do those type of workouts, and maybe I could if I did them less often, but at this point in my life, the results that I gain from them do not warrant me doing them as often as this researcher suggested. So, is it to say that we should negate what was said? No, not at all. We should look more into it and understand it, and that's something that the Trail Runner Nation podcast, that's something that Ian Sharman suggested, is that we need to look deeper into it to understand where is this coming from. Is it reputable, right? Can we look at the research and say this is a substantial find, this is valid, that we could take and implement this into people's training? Should we also look into it in the regard of who should this work for? Again, so it's not just taking it at face value and implementing it. And I think some of my athletes heard that, and the message that they received, would they just directly implement it into their training? And I received a note stating, hey, listen to that podcast, thought it was okay to go a little bit harder on this one. Again, we don't want to take it at face value. We want to analyze it and dig in a little bit deeper to understand who can this be applied to, how can it be applied, and should we even be applying it in the first place? Okay, so with everything we receive, any bit of information, again, we have to take it and really analyze it and look a little bit deeper. We have to ask people that are smarter than ourselves, what's the validity of this? How should I apply this? So it's worth conversations. It is worth talking to. I have begun to have those conversations with people that are much smarter than myself, and talk to them about it and kind of hear from them. One of my athletes also sent me, some other research that kind of goes along with this kind of idea that Zone 2 might not be the most efficient for training. So again, I want to be more specific. I want to hear more specifics. Who is this better for? Is this okay for ultra runners, right? Would this be substantial enough that we make a change for ultra runners? Is this more for 5K, 10K? Could I do this with marathoners, right? There's a lot of questions that were left unanswered. So, and I will try to include the article from my athlete as well in the show notes. So, making all these notes as we go. All right. So be careful with what you hear and what you see. Okay. Next thing I want to kind of talk to you is gear updates. I talked about how I tried so many different shoes for Western States, and again, I will do a YouTube video to kind of run through some of the things that I used and talk about what I found. Now, just like I said, with everything thus far, I am a very different runner in my needs than perhaps somebody else. And I will define myself, my running, and my needs in the video. I have a left ankle that is very weak and easily rollable. So I know that I need something that is very nimble, that can move with me. I'm also taking into consideration at this point that I'm allowed to use poles in the Tor de Geants. That provides me a lot more stability, whereas in Western States we were not allowed to use poles. So many of the shoes that I tried were not adequate for me because they didn't have the stability my ankle needed, or they were overstable, they were too rigid and didn't allow my foot to move as it should upon more technical and varied terrain. So what I've selected to talk about today, and these will be in the video as well, is I start with the one that I've been using the most here, and that's the Olympus 275. Altra has come out with a new edition for the Olympus family. It is lighter weight. It's got great traction. It uses I believe the Vibram Mega Grip outsole. And it's got very, very nice foam. It's lighter. It's a little softer. It is definitely more nimble and more flexible than the Olympus 6. I also have the Olympus 6. The Olympus did extremely well for me at Bigfoot. I really enjoyed that shoe at Bigfoot. With the Olympus 6, it is a nice update. I do like the way it feels, but it doesn't move as nimbly as the Olympus 275. The Olympus 275 also has in a built-in gator, which is a nice feature. Like I said, I really am enjoying the Olympus 275. I think I talked about it a little bit last time. The only thing that I don't like about the Olympus 275 is the liner that comes into it. So the sock liner that comes with it. In this humid environment that I live, as soon as my feet get wet or I do some river crossings and my feet are wet, if I take a downhill, the insole starts to bunch up and it can slide out the back or just remain folded under my foot, which obviously can create problems. So I replaced the liner. I used a Lems liner that my old store FootRx gave to me. So it works well. It's a little, in this environment, it's a little spongy, so it does absorb water, but it does stay in place. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. I did try the Olympus 6 liner in the 275, and that works great too, but then I don't have a liner for my Olympus 6, or I'm transferring them back and forth. But the one that comes in the Olympus 275, that liner can be problematic. Now, you could glue it down, of course, but if that glue comes undone during the race, then you're going to face the same problem that you started with. So I suggest replacing the liner with some, aftermarket liner, or something different. Not necessarily an insole, but something that will be similar to a sock liner. Okay, so Olympus 6, Olympus 275. Right now, I am liking the Olympus 275 much better. I think those go for $175 retail. But I think it's a great shoe. Been very pleased with it. The traction has been great. I love the grip. It's done well on wet rocks, and mud and dirt and everything. I've really enjoyed that shoe. As I said, it moves a lot more nimbly than the Olympus 6. So enjoying that investment. The Norda 002. This shoe felt great underfoot. When I was out west, I used it a little bit for some hiking and stuff. It moves very well. It's very flexible. It grips extremely well. They did a great job teaming with Vibram on this one, both the midsole and the outsole. I think they did a tremendous job with this shoe. As I said, it moves extremely well. The problem here in the southeast, once again, comes when the shoe gets wet. If you are sweating, if you go through a creek crossing, the shoe does not drain. All it does is just retain water. I literally could, go through a crossing, a creek crossing, a river crossing, run for, a good half hour, 45 minutes, in which any other shoe should have dispersed the water. I could take off the shoe and I can literally dump water out. So that is an extreme problem. It does not drain at the least. I heard Finn Melanson was going to run the wilderness, the 100-mile wilderness up in Maine on the AT in Nordas, and I just felt extremely bad for him because the shoe will not drain, and that is, it could be dry this summer, but if it is wet, his feet are going to be miserable. The only thing I caution you to is perhaps creating some drainage ports in the shoe. maybe creating some, drilling out some drainage ports that you could allow water to dissipate from, because the upper is it's quite closed. It doesn't allow water to come out the sides, and obviously nothing comes out the bottom, so it needs some way to dissipate water. That's my biggest thing with that. Otherwise, the shoe felt great. I think they did a great job with this shoe. I love the toe box. It's a great fitting shoe. Again, feels super comfortable and nimble. I love the way it moved over land in a dry environment. It's a great shoe. So, again, kudos to Norda. I think they're on the right track. They didn't quite nail it. It just needs drainage. I have absolutely zero affiliation with any of these companies, so I am going to be open and unabashed. So, I don't mean to complain about shoes, but I want you to have a heads up as to, because a lot of these shoes we're buying blindly, so I want you to know what are the positives and negatives to some of these. The next one, I just got the Fuga. That's Fuga, the 330, which obviously it's kind of designed for a race like Tor de Geants. Tor de Geants is a 330 kilometer race, and Fuga is, or Kailas is the parent company, is a main sponsor. So I figured I'd give their shoe a shot. This one just came in yesterday, so I have not had a chance to really wear it. I slipped it on my foot. It's extremely soft and comfortable, not overly soft, in a standing perspective, but I have not had, obviously running or hiking feet on the ground with the shoe, so I don't have enough experience to really review this shoe, but it's supposed to breathe and drain well, so we'll put that to the test here as soon as I can, and I'll give you more feedback to come. I did get the Ultra Aspire Zygos 6, their new Zygos pack, which is now in their 6th edition. This is one that I'll probably do a video on as well. I am pleased with the storage capacity. The capacity of this pack is tremendous. It comes with the 27 ounce flasks, so that's 800 milliliters. So there's a large soft flask, so you can carry 2 of those in the front pockets. So, and you can also carry a 2-liter bladder in the back, and then it still has capacity to carry more. Even with, I had 1.5 liters on my back and 54 ounces on the front, the 2 bottles. The pack felt very balanced. I love the way that worked. It felt really good. It's not restrictive. They've got good kind of bungee cords on the front, so your chest can expand and breathe and feel normal when you're moving with the pack. Like I said, it's well balanced. The issue that I found was that the drop-in pockets are a little too loose, and I lost gels that I didn't even realize came out. And then when I was aware of that, I tried to push them in deeper. I found the gels kind of slid their way back up, and I even saw one pop out in front of me, which I was glad that time because I saw it and put it back away. But the drop-in pockets don't seem to hold very well, which is a concern. There's also the clasp enclosures. They go across where your chest is open, and I got an extremely bad chafing from the clasp enclosure. I do like the Solomon in that the hook is off to the side and the hook comes away from the body, whereas the Ultra Aspire, the hook is actually turned towards the body. You could twist it and turn it the other way, but that plastic hook is still in an open space across the bare of the skin, or the opening, if you will, of the sternum closure. So it has the capacity to cause some chafing problems, which it did in my case. Was extremely painful. But again, great storage, great balance. I love the capacity to carry. Love the 27-ounce bottles. I did try to use the 27-ounce bottles in my Solomon Advanced Skin 15, and they fit. They did fit in there. It does make the vest a little bit more bouncy. There's a positive and a negative to the amount of stretch that the Salomon packs have, and that being that if you put too much weight in it, it becomes a little bit more and more bouncy, no matter how much you cinch it down, especially with 54 ounces on the front. It was okay. It wasn't like really bad, but I felt that the Ultra Aspire, the Zygos, did a better job with the fluids and balancing and not bouncing as much, whereas the Salomon seemed to bounce more and more. I did order a Kylus pack. They have a pack that's specifically designed for the needs of the Tor de Geants, and I'm waiting for that to arrive. But it's got a pocket for your puffy jacket as well as your rain jacket. I believe that they have a waterproof membrane in those pockets so that it should keep your gear dry. I have to double check on that, and again, I'm waiting to get it, so I'll provide feedback upon that when I get more experience with that. So I have two Kylus products to review, and we'll talk about those more and as the time draws on and I have more experience with them. I'm thinking of getting a new Lecky. I've been using the lightest Lecky poles, the trail running poles that I have. I've broken two within the last week. They're very light, but at the same time, on rugged terrain, you can only get a few bends out of them before they break. And I've been running a very technical terrain, which is why a lot of my training runs have been so slow. Not only that, but I've been doing a lot of vertical grain and putting a lot of stress upon the poles. So I'm thinking that if I go to the next pole down, which is actually a thicker pole, sure, it's a little bit heavier, but it may be a little bit more durable. So I still have 3 of the lightweight poles left. I just don't know where I want to put my money because I want to have backup poles as a just in case in the Tor de Geants, because there are a lot of sections that are very rocky. Some of those sections I'll just put the poles away. I did get the quiver, and I will state that the quiver from Ultra Aspire is definitely easier to access and get poles in and out of than the Salomon quiver. They both have the same type of attachment, so if you're interested in a quiver, I might suggest looking into the Ultra Aspire quiver over the Salomon. I found that it's easier to access to get things in and out of than the Salomon, just as a heads up. But yeah, so looking into the Leckies, the other thing about the Kylus pack too is it has a boa enclosure. I don't think that the strings are very bungee, and that is a concern. I don't like things very tight because I feel like it restricts breathing. So we'll see how it goes when it gets here. I'm hoping it works out. So we will see. So a lot of things here, a lot of things to have more experience with and draw experience so that I can give you guys a little bit more feedback. And like I said, I've been through a ton of shoes for Western States, and we'll talk about those in a future episode. But I want to thank everybody once again. I want to thank you for encouraging me to keep doing this and to keep producing these episodes and keep talking to you. I want to thank you guys for writing in and suggesting and asking questions. I want to also encourage you to continue to do that. Please ask me questions. Ask me about things you want to hear about. Ask me about things you've heard, and it could be, my opinion or what I know about a certain topic. Speaking of the UESCA courses, I am working on my strength and conditioning certification right now. It will not make me a strength coach. I want to put that first and foremost. All of their certifications just allow me to have a better understanding and knowledge and provide a little bit more feedback to my runners that I coach. At this time, I am accepting a few new runners, so if you yourself are looking for coaching or perhaps want to talk about having coaching in the future, please reach out. You can do so through my website, which is runningislife.run. That is in the show notes. That is the easiest way to kind of talk to me about coaching. If you want to leave me a comment, question, you can do so on social media. My Instagram and Facebook are in the show notes as well. You can also do so through Strava. People have left me messages through the new messenger part of Strava. You can just comment on a run and ask me a question there. I'm so happy to really answer these questions and make it more personable for you. So thank you again for all of those questions. So other than that, my friends, Keegan is about to go to college. We're looking at heading there mid-August to drop him off in Portland. I did have a question come in about high school training and what we do, how we do things. As I said, our cross country season has started in the regards that we are training to kind of fill that page in, and I appreciate that question as well. We have really just begun building a base, and if you listen to the Zone 2 podcast that I mentioned, the researcher mentions that the aerobic base is a waste of time, which I have a hard time believing. Perhaps we'll find out differently, but he just suggests getting straight into hard workouts, which it just kind of floored me. But we started doing some running, building up some volume. We have I think I have about 14 freshmen this year, which is awesome. We have a very young team, but I diversify my training, and I always stress that to coaches, that what your juniors and seniors are doing isn't necessarily what your freshmen need to be doing. There are some freshmen that have more experience and more maturity than others, but you have to look at each runner, and perhaps there's a new junior or a new senior, and they're in the same boat. You don't want to have them doing what your returnees, if you will, what they're doing. You have to be careful and be mindful of where somebody is at, not only in their training, but in their maturity process. So be mindful of that, and be aware that you need to tailor everyone's training differently. There should be different workouts for different ability levels, and not all kids have to work out. That's another thing that I think coaches make a mistake on. It's workout day, and you don't necessarily need to have them do a workout. So think about the person and what they're up to. What is their injury history, right? Should they be working out? We've incorporated a lot of more cross training this year. So some of the kids, like today, we had one of the kids, we were running on a paved greenway, and the pavement bothers his knees. So he brought out his bike and just rode while we ran. Now he did his own ride, got in a good ride, a substantial amount of miles, while we just did the running part. I biked as well, but I biked with the kids. So be aware that some kids should be cross training, and in order to keep them healthy. Going back to what I was saying is, we built up about 3 weeks of just building simple volume, starting with, on the easy side, 3 days a week for some of the kids that are just starting to run and just getting into running, to, maybe 4 or 5 days for the returnees, and then growing, adding a day to the following week. So if they ran 3 days, they may run 4 days the second week, maybe stay at 3, depending on where they're at. And then that's the other big piece, is you have them communicate with you. How are they doing? How sore are they? Right? Look at the telltale signs. And if they need another week at 3 days, then so be it. And if they want to throw in a 4th day, maybe it's cross training. It's another great way to get them another day of training without it being running. So we then, after 3 weeks, we moved into doing some hill strides. So they were doing 10-second hill strides. On the shorter side, the kids did 4. On the longer side, the returnees did 8, and just 10 seconds recovery back down to the bottom of the hill. The week after that, we did another set of 10-second hill strides. We did about 6 to 10, growing by 2 reps. And then we did a second set later in the week, but we did 6 by 20 seconds or 4 by 20 seconds, depending on the kid. And then, the week after that, we did 8 by 20 6x20, depending on the kids, and got in 2 sets, or 2 different workout days. So perhaps Tuesday, Friday, we did strides, and still growing in volume. So, and an amount of days running. It took us about maybe 6 to 7 weeks before this is the first week that the kids are actually running 6 days a week. And that's simply because during cross-country season, we'll be practicing Monday through Friday and racing on Saturdays. Friday, of course, will be a very easy day where we don't do a ton of volume, just do some light running and some strides, and then race day. Race day for us, it depends on the kid once again, but they'll probably race, and then we have a short workout thereafter, and then a cool down. So we make it a good workout day because we typically work out one day during a race week, and then on race day we race and then do a micro workout. So our first race is coming up August 16th. So the kids' races are coming up quick. This week they had their first workout. We did the Sisyphus hill session. You can find the Sisyphus hill session online. I'll try to find Sisyphus, just writing it down. I'll try to find that for you guys and include a link in the show notes if you're interested in the Sisyphus hill session, because I include that in my all my runners do that pretty much in their base training. We go kind of base training, strides, fartlek. So a lot of my athletes that are doing fartlek workouts prior to getting into main workouts do the Sisyphus. But again, based on the history of the runner, a typical Sisyphus hill session workout is 3 different sets. A set would include 30 seconds, 1 minute, 130, and 2 minutes uphill. Okay, so that's your intervals: 30 seconds, 1 minute, 130, 2 minutes, and you return to the start as your recovery. That's one set. I had runners ranging from 1.5 sets, so they would complete one set and then do the 30 second and 1 minute intervals, and then they would call it. I had some make it through 2 sets and then call it. I had some make it through 2.5 sets and then call it, and I had a few kids get all the way through 3 sets. We didn't have a lot complete the whole workout. Again, it's one of our first workouts back, so didn't want to overdo it. But having it uphill puts less stress on the body while building strength and speed. So it's a good way to kind of start kids out, and that's why we start with hill strides to kind of introduce them to the concept, and then get them used to doing some hill repeats. So Sisyphus was a great introduction. The kids did that this week, and then they had a set, or they will have a set of hill strides tomorrow, and then we'll have a long run on Saturday. So that's kind of how we're going right now. We do fartlek workouts for about 4 weeks. I typically work within 4-week blocks. The other thing you have to monitor is kids' fatigue level, just as we do with athletes. If you're seeing a kid that's a non-responder that's just getting slower and more tired, then give them a break. Take them out for a week, and what that week will look like is just simply recovery runs and some cross training. Allow them to recover, because they're not going to get better if they're just getting more and more tired. So my kids are getting used to communicating with me. My returnees are all very accustomed to me and are very used to communicating with me how they're feeling and what they're doing. I give them a range every day. I'm saying, okay, you can go, like for instance, today was 4 to 8 miles, depending on who you are. Some of the kids were like, okay, I'm just going to do 4. Others were 5. And then I had, a group that did 7. I had a group that did 8. So again, giving them a range and allowing them to control based on how they're feeling and how, how comfortable they are. What is their fatigue level? How's the body responding? Or we had a recovery day yesterday after the Sisyphus hill workout, for instance. And I said 3 to 5 miles, and some went 3, nice and easy. Others did 4, and I had a couple do 5. So it just depends on the person, and they have to understand, and that's what you have to explain to them, is that you're not going to get better if you're doing too much and going too hard too often and not recovering when you should be. And you have to explain, what is your expectation? Like yesterday, I told them, I do not want you going hard today. If I hear you breathing too hard, I'm going to send you back. So make sure it's easy. Run your own pace. Do not get caught up in somebody else's pace. And we talked about that during the workout as well. Don't try to hang with the front runner. Okay. You're not here to prove anything to me or yourself on this workout. All you're doing is working out. It shouldn't be too hard. If you're too taxed and it's not happening, well, I'm going to pull you, because I don't want you going too hard right now. So it's getting them used to your expectations and understanding what is transpiring in the workout. What are they trying to do in the workout? What's the goal? How hard should they be going? How hard should it feel? How hard should the recovery be? What should they feel when they're done recovering? How do they know when they're done? Okay. All of these things should be explained so that they understand the expectations. So that's where we're at with cross country right now. I hope that helps. You guys that are coaching cross country right now and kind of understanding where you're at. Maybe you're doing something different and it's working great for you, and that's fantastic. I always wish the best for coaches. I had a few coaches reach out this summer and ask me questions about the season ahead. I really appreciate that you really have that you think of me that way, that I can help you, and you have the ability to ask, and that's great that you feel comfortable asking me, and I hope all of you feel that way. I'm here to help. I really want to see success in this sport. The better the kids get, the more successful we are, because the sport's just going to get better, and it elevates all of us. So, again, if you're a coach and you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I am happy to help other coaches as well. I want to make sure that you know what you're doing and that you're doing the best for your runners. I recently took a course that I was kind of appalled by how people put together workouts and expect that their runners are going to have great results. And because when we talked about it, they're like, I keep getting injured runners. And I try to explain to them in the short time I had with them, the reasons being that they're just creating too much fatigue within the training. So be cognizant of what you're doing, coaches, and how you're treating your athletes. It's super important to keep them healthy. That should be the one of the first and foremost things that we do as coaches is, we strive to keep our athletes healthy and enjoying the sport. So keep enjoying it, my friends. Stay healthy. Enjoy it. Don't be stupid like me and do too much. So I really appreciate you guys. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. Running is life.